Good morning, and we are going to be covering today exhibits and amendments that you don't necessarily use every single day. Some of them you should be using every day, and others are more abstract, but you need to know exactly what to do and how to use them. If there's a specific document that you are concerned about, would you please speak up now so I can make sure that we talk on it and review it? Any requests as we go along? If you can think of one that we want to, then definitely let me know, all right? Please stop me if you have any questions, and let's get started, shall we? So I'm going to share my screen. And, ooh, nice breeze. All right, so we're starting off with the community association disclosure. Now, I have this up here not because you complete it. You should not touch this document. There's another one that you should not touch. What is it? Anybody?
Seller's disclosure.
Yes, the seller's disclosure. So we don't touch either of these. So if your client asks you to fill out anything on there, you run. You're not allowed to put any information in here legally.
I have a question, Julianne.
Yes.
For the seller's property disclosure, if the sellers fill it in by hand and we have that copy, can I type it in to make it nicely, neat, and then save it that way?
I wouldn't, and here's why. I prefer my clients do it by hand for one reason and one reason only. I want everyone to know that it was in their handwriting and it was not me that completed it.
Okay.
There's a purpose behind me doing that. So, for example, with the whole new DocuSign thing, one of the things they've been talking about and that Kimberly went and did was she made it so that all of the boxes can be checked and added so that they could do it online, which is great. But I personally will only use that if they don't have the capability to print and scan. If they have the ability to print and scan, I'm going to send it to them like this. I'm going to ask them to print it out, to fill it out, to scan it, and send it back to me. I don't want them doing it so that it looks electronic, because anybody could have filled that out. It's an extra precaution so everybody knows it was the seller that filled it out and not me. Make sense, everybody? Now, there is one portion of this document that's critical. This is all of the information on the community association, but what I always point out to them is right here under C1. It says here, the seller warrants at closing that the buyer shall be required to pay no more than, and it's blank. And I can tell you that almost every seller is going to leave that blank because they don't read it through and it screws them over. Blank for all transfer, initiation, and administrative fees. If it is not filled in right here, when the closing attorney finds out that there are transfer, initiation, or admin fees, and the seller has put nothing here, that cost is goes on the seller side. So to protect your seller, you make sure that they do their due diligence, that they call, that they find out what that information is, and that they put it in there so that that does not cost them money at the closing table. All right? Okay. That's
so Julianne, does that mean that means if there's an association fee, say $500, and they're buying the house in the middle of the year, and they got to pay them back like $250? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about, so every time that you buy a new property, HOAs are looking for ways to constantly make money.
Yes.
So there's a transfer fee. Sometimes there's initiation fees that could be like $900, $1,000.
Okay.
There could be admin fees. For example, we just sold a townhouse. There's only 45 units in this neighborhood, right? We asked just to find out what this information is right here. There was a $500 initiation fee, and she charged us $150 for all we asked was for the information. She sent us an email request with information. It was $150 for that information. Took her 2 seconds to get it to us, but she charged $150. They're just looking for ways to beef up their coffers is what it is. But the point is, if they don't fill out anything, the seller will eat this when it's the buyer's responsibility. Okay? I want to make sure everybody's clear on that one. I'm not going to go through the rest of this. You guys should read through it, okay? Next one is lead-based paint. When do we need a lead-based paint?
When the house is built before 1978.
Correct. Before 1978, it is required. And I just found out, I didn't know this, even if you're renting a property that was built before 1978, you need to have one of these suckers. So I'm still struggling to get people to sign off on this thing so I can get paid. So just FYI, it's important to have it.
How about the house that built in 1970?
1970?
1978, the house that built on that day,
Nope,
that year.
prior to 1978. So if it's 1978 or older, you don't need it. Okay. The only time that I would have this if it was newer than 1978 is if they had done a lot of renovations and they had put a lot of old stuff in the house, like an antique mantle, right? You don't know. I mean, it's really old. So I would have in lead-based paint specifically for that because you don't know. And there are some brokerages that require lead-based paint on every single house that they sell, whether it was 1978 or not. They're just covering their, you know what, all right? So we're filling in the offer date and the address. So for you, if you're representing a seller, you would not put the date in yet, but you would put the address, okay? Now, here, the seller is initiating or initialing here, and they have to check one of the boxes. They know that there is lead-based paint present in the house, and then they have to explain. They have no knowledge of the lead-based paint. And then B, they have records or they have no records. So both A and B need to be checked for one of those two things. Then the buyer is required to initialize, and they either will choose to take a 10-day assessment and inspection, or they're going to waive the right to do that. You, as the listing agent, you need to sign this, initial it, that the seller understands their responsibility for compliance. So if the house is older than 1978, make sure that you've given them what to do if your house has potential of lead-based paint. It's that one of those brochures, okay? And then everybody needs to sign it, including you, that it's accurate. Notice it says, it is the intent to be applicable for both sale and leasing of the property. Okay? Questions about lead-based paint? It seems easy, but it is missed a lot. I miss it too. So there you go. All right. Now we're going to talk about money. So with every purchase and sale agreement, you have to have one of 4 or one of 5 documents. What are the 5 documents? When we're talking about money, what are the 5?
The loan contingency.
Yes. So let's name the 5.
Financial contingency.
Say that a little bit louder, Nisha.
Financial contingency.
Yeah, but which one? There's 5 of them.
There are FHA.
FHA.
Conventional.
Conventional.
VA.
VA.
Cash.
All cash. USDA.
USDA, yeah. I was about to say.
USDA, which we only use way out in the boonies, and so it very rarely applies to us, okay? But you need to have, with every purchase and sale agreement, one of those 5 documents to accompany it. So we're going to review the top 4 very quickly. On the all cash exhibit, you're going to put the offer date and the purchase, the address, and then you have some choices under A. The buyer has sufficient liquid assets to purchase the property. They reserve the right to pay all or a portion by obtaining an institutional first mortgage. So you're either checking that, or they reserve the right to pay all or portion by getting a non-institutional first. So what's the difference between institutional and non-institutional first mortgage? Anybody got an idea?
Non-institutional is maybe personal money.
Correct. So it's called hard money, right? And not a non-institutional is where they're getting a loan from somebody else, from an investor. It's not an institution, but an institution would be a savings and loan, a bank, a mortgage company. Those would be on the first one. All right. So they can either reserve the right to do that, or B, they're going to not have the right to obtain it, and they intend to spend all of the money their money buying the property. Okay. And it's notice here, it says, therefore the buyer has no right to unilaterally extend the closing date for 8 days. Why would that be? Because in our contracts that buyers have the right to unilaterally extend for 8 days the closing. Under what circumstances? Anybody got a clue? All right, then this is a learning opportunity for you. You can only use the 8 days if the lending.
Because it's a cash deal, why would we give them an extension?
Exactly, because there's no lender.
Right.
The unilateral 8 days can only be used by a lending institution. And you have to prove that they need the extension. Now, I want to make this a very serious point, because I had a client, a situation in January of this year where the seller of the house came to us and said, hey, we're looking at, we really want to extend our, or change our closing date. And instead of just using the 8 day unilateral later on, we decided we would try to negotiate with you. And I said, so is this lender related? Oh no, it's timing for the seller. So we don't want to have to use the unilateral. And I said, well, you can't use the unilateral. And she said, yes, we can. I said, the unilateral is only used for the mortgage. And she just like crickets. And she realized, oh no, she screwed up, right? She didn't know what she was talking about. So you need to know your stuff, because that's the only time you can use a unilateral. If you're going to extend a closing other than that, then it needs to be agreed on by all parties. All right, questions about that? So you've got to check one of these three. Either they're going to reserve the right to get a first mortgage, that they're going to reserve a right to get a mortgage with somebody that's non-institutional, or they're not going to reserve that right. Okay?
Julianne?
Yes, question?
Yes, for the for the institutional lender, is there any difference between the mortgage broker and mortgage lender?
Mortgage lender and a mortgage broker are both institutional.
So there's no
Hard
difference.
money or non-institutional is like an investor. It's not a mortgage company. Okay.
Do we have to show any evidence at the time of making the offer? Or the hard money?
She's talking about verification of funds.
That's coming up at number 2. But with these, these two, you're just saying you're reserving the right to do it. We're paying cash, we're intending to pay cash, but we may reserve the right to do this. If you do, then yes, you need to change and use one of the other, either conventional or FHA, right? If you switch. But for now, what we're saying is we're paying cash, but oh yeah, we may reserve the right. Okay? All right, under verification of funds, you're gonna put how many days from the binding agreement that that they provide to the seller information describing the specific details of all sources the buyer funds will have to purchase the property. So it's a letter from a trust, brokerage, institutional, stocks, bonds, whatever, that states that they have it, or it could be an account statement. So you could use a deck page from like an IRA or a checking account, a savings account. Definitely, if they're going to use something like that, make sure that they black out their account number and anything, personal, a personal address. Their name needs to be on it so that it shows that it's them, but you do need to have proof of funds. Okay, questions on that? She's going to put within so many days, so it doesn't have to be when you put the offer in. Okay, Seller's right to terminate. In the event that the buyer fails to provide the seller with the required information within the time frame above. In other words, this is like a binding agreement. I mean, like a due diligence. Just like with earnest money, right?
Mhm.
The seller shall notify the buyer of the default and give the buyer 3 days to cure it. If they don't cure it, then the seller may terminate within 7 days. Okay? So this is very similar to with an earnest money. You've got to have it in. This is nothing to dink around with, okay? All right. Last but most important is an appraisal contingency. Even though they're paying cash, they do have the right, if they want, to get an appraisal. So you're going to check whether they choose to or choose not to get an appraisal on the property. Okay? And if you're going to do that, I highly recommend that the amount of time that you do for your due diligence is long enough to get that appraisal in here, right? During your due diligence.
Mhm.
So that if it doesn't appraise, that you've got some time to renegotiate. Okay? And then you're going to, selection of the appraiser is going to be either by the buyer or the seller or somebody else. But you need to check that. Okay? Any questions about the all cash? Here is rights of the buyer if the property does not appraise. So this is your financial contingency for an all cash appraisal. If the appraisal performed does not, and so excuse me, I'm going to negate what I just said about the due diligence. You could put it during due diligence, but you don't have to because you're going to put within so many days of the binding agreement date, and this is your ability to negotiate on the appraisal if it doesn't hit the sale price. So you have to provide a complete copy of the appraisal. Buyers shall be deemed to have waived buyer's right to request a reduction in the sales price, and this agreement shall no longer be subject to appraisal contingency if within so many days you do not confront the seller and give them a copy of the appraisal, right? So you've got the right to renegotiate, but only within those days. So you need to make sure you give yourself enough time, okay? And if you doesn't agree, there is a way for you guys to separate without it costing the buyer their earnest money.
Julianne, is that 10 days like a fair? Is that?
I would probably do 14 just to be safe, because once they do the appraisal, they go back and they do their figuring, and sometimes it takes a while to get to you.
Okay. All
So
right. Good. Thank
10
you.
to 14 days, but I mean, if you've got somebody that you use that you know is pretty fast, yeah, you could do 10, but I typically would do 14.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
Uh-huh. All right. So the buyer is not obligated to seek a price reduction. So if it doesn't appraise, the buyer's not required to ask for a reduction. And then the buyer's obligated to purchase it at that price, okay? And everybody initials that. All right, so that's one of them. Here's the conventional loan exhibit. Same thing up here. You're gonna check the box A. This is a first mortgage. Very rarely are you gonna see a first and a second. You would do that if it's gonna be, sometimes with larger homes, there is a, pardon me, you have a first and a second because you can only have a loan it's so big, so there might be a second on it. But your first mortgage is here. Everybody gets this wrong. Notice it says the loan amount is percentage of the purchase price. I see so many things here. I see 3%, I see 5%, 20%. No, the loan amount is what they're putting down, right? So if they're putting 10% down, you're putting what here?
90.
90, that's right, okay? So that's what the purchase of the loan amount is. Typically, this is gonna be 30 years. Very rarely do I see 15. It could be, but typically it's gonna be 30 years. Your interest rate. Ladies, and I'm assuming it's just all ladies here. I apologize if there are gentlemen. I can't see your names. The interest rate is a placeholder. Okay, your client is not tied to this, but it is required to be at least what the interest rates are or a little bit higher. So I always just put in a placeholder that's a little bit higher. So right now interest rates are around 2.75. I would put 3 just to give ourselves some cushion. And I let my client know this is a placeholder. You are not tied to this. This is between you and your lender when you lock in your rate. Okay. If it's institutional, it's going to be, well, it doesn't, not always, but it's either fixed or it's adjustable. Most mortgages are fixed. An adjustable would be like an ARM. And that used to be really popular a while ago. They're not that popular nowadays. So most of them are fixed. And interest only, believe it or not, if you didn't know this, in California, they have interest only loans. They never pay on the principal. It's only interest because their real estate expenses are so high. Can't imagine buying a house and paying only interest. And then your source, if it's a mortgage lender, it's going to be institutional. Okay. This is new, seller and other. I've never seen the seller before. That's new on a 2020. And I'm not quite sure what they mean by seller source of term, unless it's like you've gotten secret financing. That, you know what, that would be non-institute, or other would be non-institutional, right? Okay. Approved lenders. If your client is looking at several people, you could put both of them in there. Once you put somebody in there, unless you're going to, if they're going to change it and they're still shopping around, don't fill anything in. If you know what they're going to, which company they're going to go with, I would put that in there. I typically will put, especially if it's somebody that I know has a great reputation, like with Supreme Lending, I use Matt Garcia. I not only put Supreme Lending, I put Matt Garcia's name, I put his phone number in there, because what I'm saying is, hey, call him. Go ahead, call him. He'll tell you they're really in good shape, okay? Buyer may apply for different loans. If they change, you have to change this document. You can't stick with a conventional loan exhibit if you end up going with FHA. And that's what it's saying, is you can apply for different ones, but if you switch the type of loan, you also need to switch your agreement, okay? And then once the buyer has chosen the person, then they need to tell the seller so that they can give their right to proceed, that this is who they're going to use, okay? Now, financial contingency. The amount that you're going to put in here for your financial contingency is dependent on your relationship with that lender and how long it's going to take them to get the loan approval. And by approval, I mean they're basically clear to close. How long will it take them? Some people, if they've done their pre-approvals up front, it could be as little as 10 days. I typically, on average, put 21 days here. It gives them plenty of time. However, if you're talking about a credit union or a big box bank, that could be anywhere from 30 to 45 days. So you just need to know that. And this number here, quite honestly, is something as a listing agent that I look at. Not just the type of loan, but I look at how long is our financial contingency. Okay? So this is whether they're going to get the loan denial letter or the loan approval, and it's a conditional approval is what it is. It basically says, hey, we're ready to go. We're just waiting on a couple of things, and that would be final minute things or a last minute pull on their credit before close. Okay. During this time, if it's found out that the buyer cannot get approved for the loan, you have this amount of days to terminate that contract and for the buyer to get their earnest money back. You would terminate based on the fact that they could not get the loan. However, if we put 21 days here and at 25 days we find out that they can't get approved and we terminate, what happens to the earnest money?
Lose it.
That's right, it goes to the seller. So our job as buyer's agents is to protect earnest money, and due diligence and financial contingency are two dates that we watched diligently to protect, okay? All right.
Julianne,
Yes.
is the financial contingency, isn't it a little bit different with FHA?
It is, and we're going to get to that in just a second. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay. The rest of this is all explanations on a seller's right to terminate and a seller's right for evidence to be able to close. The seller has the right to get that letter that says that we are clear to close or contingently ready to close. Okay. Now, the appraisal contingency on a conventional is set at a different time. I typically will put 21 days on here too. Okay. I want the appraisal to be in line with the financial contingency, especially on a conventional loan, because if my appraisal comes in 25 days later and everything's been good to go, but we're waiting on the appraisal and the appraisal is off and we can't agree, that buyer's buying that house or he's losing his earnest money. Does everybody understand that? So on a conventional, I highly suggest that your appraisal contingency date be the same or less than the financial contingency date. Questions? We good? Okay. And everybody signs it. We are moving on to FHA. This all looks the same on the same page, and it basically is exactly the same as on a conventional. This whole portion. Here's what's different. You're putting a financial period as well. Same difference. But on the second page, notice that there's no appraisal contingency. Why is that? The appraisal contingency is for the whole length. I mean, up until closing. So you need to work with a lender that is going to get that appraisal in fast during your financial contingency. You can still negotiate with the appraisal, but you definitely, it's easier if you do it within the financial contingency. Make sense, everybody?
So you mean that for the appraisal contingency for FHA loan, it goes all the way to closing?
All the way to closing.
So if it comes back 2 days before closing that it didn't appraise, and you have a right to terminate it?
Yeah, let's find it in here. What you would write in here under the amendatory clause is the sales price. Okay. Where is the, it's not even in here. Hold on. Where is it? So let me give you an example of a situation with an FHA. An appraisal comes out, appraiser comes out, and they do a mini inspection. And they found that they're seeing a leak in the roof. And they say that the roof needs to be fixed. There's a cracked window that needs to be fixed, and something else. So they list 3 items that must be fixed in order for the sale to go through. So it could be up until the day before closing, and the appraisal has still not come in. Or been approved, because it's contingent, the sale is contingent on those items being fixed. So those items need to be fixed, and then they're going to go back out and re-inspect and then clear it so that it can be closed. And we'll get to that in just a second. All right. So Number 12, the mortgage insurance premium, please write this down, is 1.75%. That does not change unless mortgage insurance premium changes, which that does not happen very often. Okay, but this will say 1.75% on every one that you write from here on out until they change it. And typically you're going to check B, which means that it's going to be added to the finance loan amount. Okay. There are a few things that the buyer cannot pay for in an FHA loan. Same with a VA loan. And so number 14 says the seller shall pay the following fees, tax service fees. So those are either included in any closing costs that you've requested. So if you're smart, you're going to request a little bit of closing costs to cover these tax service fees. And then you're going to check that box. Or you're going to put 0 closing costs, and then you'll say are in addition to any closing costs. So that tax service fee will still be required of the seller. All right. Now, here's the repair thing that I was talking about with the appraisal. And this is separate from your due diligence. All right. They are totally separate. Any repairs required by FHA shall be completed and paid for by, and I put the seller in here, prior to closing. Such repairs do not exceed, and you need to put an amount here. So if the house is in great shape, I might put 500, no more than 1,000. If the house is in lousy shape, I'm going to put maybe 2,000, 2,500, right? I'll negotiate on the due diligence time. And I'm very careful to make sure when I'm doing that, I'm considering and thinking about what may come up on the appraisal and any additional things that are going to be asked for. And if people push back on, I want to fix these, I'll say, we got an appraisal and it's FHA, so it's going to come up. So let's get this taken care of now. And if they fight me, that's fine because I got it covered right here because they'll still have to pay for it. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. So those items have to be fixed, okay? And then it gives an explanation, and you all should read through every single word of these documents. We don't have time today to do that, but what if there's more than what you've put down here? How does it work out as far as who pays what, okay? Seller has to pay for the cost of any lender-imposed inspections of the septic systems or the wells. So if it's required, they have to pay it. Home warranty could be required by the FHA. I always ask for one anyway, so it's not a moot point. But if you're doing FHA, you should be asking for a home warranty. Now, if it's hooked up to public sewer and water, 18 is not a big deal, and you just put NA through everything. But if it's not, you do need to fill this out. So if it's on a septic system, you need to fill this out, that the seller agrees to pay for that connection. Now, if you have a house that you're listing and it's on a septic, one of the first things that I do is I call the county and I ask them, how far is this house from the near sewer line? And feasibly, is there any way that it can be connected to public water and sewer? I want to find that out for sure up front because I want to know if this came up, how much the cost would be for my seller. Typically, if somebody is in town and they are not hooked up, it's because it's exorbitant and there's no way that they're going to hook them up anyway. So it becomes a moot point, but it's in there for that protection just in case, okay? So you're going to fill that in. And then on number 20 is the arm's length. That's just saying that there's no relationship between the buyer and the seller. The reason for that is because this is a government loan and they want to make sure that there's nothing in cahoots between the two of them, all right? And then they fill this out. Oh, and by the way, if the property is a condominium unit, the purchase of the property is contingent upon the condominium being eligible and approved by FHA. It has to be approved, right? So if you know you've got an FHA buyer and they want to buy a condo, I don't even show them a condo if I don't know that it's already pre-approved. I mean, has been approved by the FHA. I don't waste anybody's time, okay?
How do you find that out?
When you have a great relationship with a lender, they can look it up for you in 2 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. typically what I've done is I'll get a list of potential houses that I'm going to show. And then I'll call my lender. Hey, have you got a second? And I just give him a list and he's like, yep, nope, yep, nope. Makes it super easy. Okay, VA. This look familiar? It's all the same. Okay, again, the whole first page basically is the same. Here's about the denial letter. Right to terminate, same, amendatory clause. All right, funding fee. The VA funding fee, typically you're gonna put that there, it will be added to the loan, or there are some people in their VA loans that don't have a funding fee. Depends on their classification and how long they were in the service. Some of them don't have a funding fee, and funding fee is typically for people that are disabled veterans. So there may be no funding fee, but typically B is what you're going to check there. Okay. Then again, certain repairs paid by the seller. The VA is also going to do an appraisal with a mini inspection. And if they find some things that need to be fixed, they don't give you a choice. It's the seller's going to pay for it, not the buyer. And you're going to put an amount in there of anticipated costs for extra things. And that is over and above your amendment to address concerns during due diligence. All right. VA does require a clear termite letter. So if you've got a VA client, I would put that in there, that the seller provide a clear termite letter. We do also, and by clear, we mean the official Georgia wood infestation inspection report. It has to be cleared. So there are some inspectors that we have that have relationships with termite companies that provide a free one, but just know that if you're working with VA, you got to have that. So you might as well get it done now so that you're not panicked at the last minute and they're going, where's the termite letter? And you don't have it. Okay. And with a VA, they're required to have a 1-year home warranty at the seller's cost. Again, public water and sewer, if it's not hooked up, how much it would cost to get it hooked up. And again, appraisal for a VA loan goes all the way to the end. Okay, questions on this? Perfect. Amendment to address concerns. When do we use this document?
Request repair.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
After inspection and would like to.
That's right. After the inspection, we are asking the seller to fix certain items in the house. This is our negotiation or renegotiation after we've gone binding. So we're going to fill out the buyer and the seller name. Let's see, somebody needs to mute. They're talking on the phone somewhere. Okay. With the binding agreement date and the address. Now, it does say for all parties agree that this, it says this amendment is intended to set forth the agreement of the parties relative to the concerns based on the buyer during due diligence period. If this amendment does not become effective during the due diligence period, it becomes null and void and is no legal force and effect. None. Let me give you an example of that. I was selling a townhouse last year, and we had negotiated back and forth. They originally wanted 14 days, and I pushed it back to 10 days, 10-day due diligence and some other things. They agreed, we went under contract. On the 10th day, they sent me an amendment to address concerns. I reviewed it with my client, and we responded back with a counter to that document. Again, we're still in negotiations, amendment to address concerns. I never heard back from the agent. Midnight came and went. They are no longer in due diligence. He called me the next day and he said, so I just want you to know my client's going to terminate. And I said, really? I said, why is that? And he goes, oh, she just decided she doesn't want to be in a townhouse. And I said, oh, that's really a shame. Because we're out of due diligence now. So she's going to lose her earnest money. And he went, no, we're not. It's 14 days. And I said, if you look at the counter said 10 days. And he went, I mean, just nothing, just dead quiet.
Wow.
He didn't know. He goes, oh my God, I just missed that. Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, you could see the panic. He goes, oh, can your people do something? Can they do anything? I mean, because he knew what was going to happen. And so did I. So I went to my client and I said, here's what's happened. I said, that money is due you. And they're like, but poor thing. It's just single girl. And I was like, no. You don't understand. This is the list. This is the buyer's agent's fault. He missed this date. He needs to pay. So there needs to be something to teach him this lesson, because this is serious. You don't screw around with people's earnest money. So they agreed. And so we agreed to reduce it to half. So he ended up stroking a check to my client for half, because it wasn't going to come out of the buyer's pocket, because it really wasn't her fault. Could it have been? Yes, but he would have lost a client. It was his fault. So I'm just letting you know, you do not mess around with due diligence or financial contingencies and your client's earnest money. Have I made myself clear? You do not. Okay. So, and your due diligence is up at midnight on that last day, midnight. So, in consideration for the seller agreeing to the concerns of the buyer's property, if all parties have agreed to this, you need to check this box, one of these. The remainder of the buyer's due diligence period shall or shall not terminate. Now, what's the value of either one? If you've still got a buyer that's kind of wishy-washy, I would put shall not terminate. But if they want this house, and if there's other people that want this house, and you want to send a message to the seller that says, we are serious about this house and we are moving forward with this house, you're going to put shall terminate, right? Because there's no reason to keep it going for another 24, 48 hours. You need to have it in there, okay?
And
So
Julianne,
for the consideration of 10, yes, question.
one thing I've learned, you have to watch it closely when you're doing a counter, because the other agent can bring it back to you and say they've terminated it. And you didn't, if you don't catch it and realize, you thought you had some more days and they've terminated it and you agree.
That's right. And any good listing agent is going to make sure that says shall not terminate.
Absolutely.
Right? It's just like kickouts, right? So one way or the other.
Mhm.
So for $10, although we all know that the $10 doesn't exchange hands, it's just in there because it is. And this is all left blank. Now, ladies, I want to make sure we're clear. What you put on here are the items that the buyer is requesting the seller to fix, repair, remove, whatever it is. You are not cutting and pasting from an inspection report and putting it in here. Okay? You are rewriting it so that it's very specific, and here's what needs to be on there. You need to put exactly what needs to be done, who is going to do it, and by that I mean a licensed, certified, whatever it is, or if it doesn't matter who it is, it doesn't have to be identified, but if it needs to be somebody specific, you need to identify who the specific is. You need to put in here somewhere that by when all this needs to be done. How are you going to prove that it was done? So we want paid receipts within 3 days of closing, you know, so you just need to be very specific when you write this up so that there is no question exactly what needs to be done and what you're asking.
Julianne,
Yes.
can we go back to that about the due date for the either due diligence or contingency and all that? You said everything ends at midnight of that day, right? I have seen a contractor say that it ends at, let's say, 8 p.m. of that day. It's doable, right? If you write it down.
If they wrote it in, then yes, then that is the end of the due diligence period, is that time. And the reason that they did that is because they're lazy agents and they don't want to be up till midnight ready to push a button to terminate if you can't agree.
So can they just put that in the purchase and sale, say that in a special step that for all due dates for anything is going to be due by 8 p.m. of that day?
You can, but it needs to be written in. Yes.
So that will cover for all due diligence period.
If you write it
all
specifically
contingency.
to cover that, then yes, but
Okay,
you have
thank
to
you.
write it specifically. And Sherry and all of us really don't want you guys writing special steps because you can get in trouble by writing them. We're not lawyers, right? So just be careful when you're doing that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
So one point I want to make before I move on. This document, if you do not have this signed before the end of your due diligence period, and by this I mean the amendment to address concerns, if it's not signed by all parties and agreed before midnight on the end of your due diligence, you should have your buyer already have completed a unilateral termination that you are ready to push a button at 11:59 to send to the listing agent. I have done this multiple times. It does not mean that you will not be able to get this done. Let's say, for example, and this happens often. So your goal as a buyer's agent is to get this into the hands of the listing agent as quickly as possible so that they have time to negotiate and to review it with their client. Sending it to them at the last day is, in my opinion, bad form and disrespectful, because you're not giving them any time to think about it, to do their own due diligence, to check for costs or anything like that. So you need to give them time. Let's say that you guys have gone back and forth and we're in agreement and verbally we've all agreed, but it's still in the listing agent's hands and you have not gotten it back signed before midnight. At 11:59, I'm shooting a unilateral termination to that agent with an email that says, hey, I haven't gotten this back yet. Tomorrow we'll fix all of this once I'm able to get back that document, and then we'll recreate everything and move forward. If I don't do that, my client's earnest money is in jeopardy, and because they haven't signed it, it's null and void. Verbal doesn't matter. Everybody understand that? I just want to make sure you all understand how critical that piece is, okay?
Julianne, back to your situation that you said you sent it and then next day, then you all agree again. Then do you have to do all this paperwork again and it's considered due diligence extended?
You're going to redo all the documents like a new contract, yes. Because basically the whole contract was null and void. But what you do is that with zero due diligence and include the ATAC with what they've, or put the what you wanted for the ATAC in the special steps of the document, and then it's a brand new contract. But yes, it can be revived. All right. Other questions? All right, I've saved the best for last for today. And this is the sale or lease of a buyer's property contingency. This didn't used to happen very often. When I first got in the business, you already had to have your house sold. Very rarely was there a house that needed to be sold in order to buy. But this is happening more and more and more. So if you have somebody that is purchasing a house, but they've got something they have to sell, you need to protect them by having this on there. Now, there's a difference between having to have it sold and choosing to have it sold, right? Because financially, if they have to, then 100% you've got to have this. If they feel more comfortable and they go, well, we could, but we really don't want to, I'd still fill this one out. With them understanding that it does create an extra, what's the word I'm looking for?
Burden.
It's a tick mark against them. You know, when I'm lining up offers, I look at tick marks. Yeah, that's in a negative way versus a positive way, right? And the sale of a property contingency can be a tick against your client. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. All right. So for the offer date, and so this goes with your purchase and sale agreement, and this is the offer date, and then their address. The buyer warns that the buyer owns real property located at, and so you're going to put their current address or whatever property it is that they're selling, and is taking the following actions to sell and or lease the other property. This is where you're going to give a description, and any good buyer's agent is going to say property is under contract, or listed and has been under contract. We're out of due diligence, or descriptions of house ready to put on market within the week. Neighborhood homes are going for 5 days or less, something like that, so that it shows how quickly this is going to turn around. Okay. So you're giving that information. The agreement is contingent on the following occurrence of the following on or before, and you put a date here. Okay, so you need to know what is a date that you're going to set. So let's say I would put as this date, for me anyway. I'll give you two scenarios. Let's say I don't have the house on the market yet, but we're ready to put it on the market as soon as we go under contract on a house. I would put the closing date that you're putting on the purchase and sale for the new house for here, because you definitely want to sell this before you buy. So it would be the same date. There's another scenario. I have already got the house on the market. It's already under contract. It's set to close by, let's say, the 25th of June, and we're going to put July 4th over here. I'd put June 25th here because that's when that's supposed to close, right? So it just depends on the scenario that you've got. But the buyer is either going to close on the sale of the property, or the buyer is entering into a lease with the term of at least, and you're going to put 12 months, 24 months, whatever that would be, okay? Number C, in the event that the contingency period ends without any contingency referenced being fulfilled, this agreement shall terminate. The contingents or contingencies referenced above may be waived by the buyer upon notice to the seller, provided that such notice is given prior to the end of the contingency period. So you have to notify them on this. But if you let it go from these dates and you don't say anything, then this doesn't come into effect, and they're still purchasing that property that they've got that they have under contract. Now, this is the one that people miss. If you are a buyer's agent protecting your buyer, you are not going to have it contingent on a kickout. If you are a listing agent and are going to accept a contingency, you will want a kickout. And what does a kickout allow you to do? In the event that the seller receives an acceptable offer to purchase the property, the seller shall give the buyer notice of the same. So in other words, they still get to advertise, and you see those in FMLS as under contract. It used to say kick out, KO. Now it says
Active under contract.
yeah, but not just under contract. There's something else on there.
Contingency?
Active under contract.
Active under contract is what it says now, right? The buyer shall then have so many hours after receipt of the notice to deposit with the holder additional earnest money of blank. So they have to pay down more money, and to deliver to the seller an amendment to this agreement signed by the buyer in which the buyer removes the following provisions in this agreement. Any not checked shall not be part of the exhibit. So it will include any of the ones that are checked or all contingencies for due diligence period. So basically, what does this do? Somebody explain to me what this kickout does for both parties.
The seller gets to market the property, and if they get a better offer, then they can either take that or renegotiate with this one. And for the buyer, if they really want this house, and they have to just remove all contingency.
Exactly. So, and I guess it would depend on if that happened and they were, they already had their house on the market and it had already gotten through appraisal and they knew that it was going to close, and the seller came to them and said, hey, we've gotten another offer. What are you going to do? I would put more money down and remove this contingency. You're not renegotiating on the price. That's already set, right? But what you are doing is removing the contingencies that you've got so that you can move forward. And then the seller's more calmer because they know it's going to happen, okay?
But
And
if the buyer had to sell their home first and it's still not under contract and the seller gets another offer, then that's probably a done deal.
You've got two choices. You're either going to remove your contingency and give them more money for the earnest money and take a chance, or you're going to terminate and move on. And if it was my buyer, I would terminate and move on.
Right, exactly.
because you want to protect them, right? Okay. That is it. There is one other document that I want to mention, and that is, whoops, hold on. Bill of sale. Has anybody ever used a bill of sale before?
No.
Personal property. Let me find it. Hold on. Okay. There we go. All right. And let me do this. Okay. Everybody can see this? Personal property bill of sale. So in the seller's disclosure, which we did not go over because we don't touch it, but in the seller's disclosure on the second to the last page, the seller checks all the boxes of all the items that are included in the sale of the property. Typically, for you newer agents that don't know, a washer and dryer and a refrigerator are not considered part of the house. So if they add those should be checked in those boxes, okay? But let's say that they were not checked, but the buyer wanted the refrigerator. So it's not on the seller's disclosure that the refrigerator is included, but the buyer wants the refrigerator. You're going to use the personal property agreement sale. You're going to add it as a document on the 6th page, 7th page of the purchase and sale agreement. And you are going to fill in kitchen refrigerator, and you're going to put a price of 0. And then you're going to, total cost is 0. And then you're going to say that this is part of a purchase and sale agreement for the offer date of, and the address, and have everybody sign it. If there were items in the house that were going to be sold, you would put the description and the price that was negotiated with both parties and the total amount. And this could be part of the contract. But whether it's, we want them to throw this in for free, or we've negotiated a price, you need to use this document. It doesn't go on the special STIP section. Okay, because I see that happen a lot. It needs to be on this document. Other questions?
Is this document considered exhibit or?
It
No,
is
it's-
an exhibit, yes.
But it doesn't have a place for us to put exhibit A, B, C, D.
Actually, no, Nisha, and it's not included, so you need to write it in. So you would just write personal property agreement. Well, it's an agreement. It says right there, it's an agreement.
So how do we know if a purchase and sales agreement has this one attached? Do we put in special step that, okay, a personal property agreement attached?
Nope, I'll show you. Hold, please.
So this is only if it's not on the other document, right? Wasn't checked off.
Yes,
Not at the
okay.
last page of
Disclosure.
purchase and sale.
You guys all see my purchase and sale agreement, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to, and don't laugh at me that I'm still using dot loop. I still haven't figured out in DocuSign how to be
I am too. I'm sorry. I'm with you.
Well, I
I'm
know
looking at that. This.
I know how to
that
create
look.
them, but as far as being able to play with blank ones, I haven't figured that out yet. So I will. I'll figure it out. Okay, so here, Nisha, on 8 is where you would write personal property amendment.
That's right. Okay.
Now, your exhibits are lettered.
Right.
Your amendments are numbered. Has everybody got that? Your exhibits are lettered, your amendments are numbered. And the way that I do this with the purchase and sale, to me, this makes the most sense. It's in order of importance. A is always your money, whether it's all cash, FHA, conventional, whatever it is, A is always the money, okay? B would be, in this case, sale of the contingency of the house. That's important, right? So I would put that as a B. Seller's disclosure, community association, lead-based paint. Then it doesn't really matter as much, but I always put the most important stuff up near the front, okay? And so you're gonna make sure that you check those boxes, all right? Other questions?
Julianne, I have a quick question about escalation clause, please.
About the what?
Escalation clause?
Escalation clause, okay?
Yeah, normally, I mean, if you're a listing agent, and if you have multiple offers, and you would want to put that in, right?
Yes. So I would only put an escalation clause in if I knew there were other offers, if my client was extremely serious about this house, and we wanted to make sure that they got it. But I also would use an escalation clause only if I knew that there was enough wiggle room between what we wanted to offer and what the house was worth to make it warrant. For example, if a house is listed at $250,000 and it's at the top of that neighborhood and nothing is sold for $250,000, I am not going to recommend to my client that they put an escalation clause for $255 or $260 because it's not going to appraise. So why would I throw an escalation clause in there? It makes no sense. So there's a lot of variables when it comes to using an escalation clause. But a good escalation clause, and I'll read you the one that I've used. I got this from my, a good escalation clause, and I can send this to you guys if you don't have it already. In the event of multiple offers, the buyer agrees to pay $1,000 more than the highest competing written offer under comparable terms and conditions presented to the seller on or before, and then I give a deadline. So I don't want them to be able to draw, I'm putting variables in there, right? Except that in no event shall the buyer pay a purchase price of more than blank. So you're going to put a cap on it. And as a precondition to the offering the greater sum, the seller agrees to provide the buyer with a bona fide copy of the competing benchmark offer. So there's no question how much is the max, how much more than the max we're willing to pay within the time frame of when that offer has to be, and it needs to be comparable. So, apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And then we get a copy of it to see that it's real. Okay? All right, let's see here. Other questions? Seller, thank you, Lilia. Seller is owner financing. Okay, and that could be where they were getting a private loan. And FHA is sticky about mobile and modular homes. Yeah, they don't like them at all, period, from what I understand. So thank you for both of those comments, y'all. Other questions or concerns about?
Mine's just on a loan, just real quick, because someone asked me yesterday for what's the difference between Quicken Loans? Like, is Quicken Loans considered an institution?
Yes.
And so you can get approved by Quicken Loans, and it's the same as getting approved by a lender.
Yeah. Some people have really good luck with Quicken Loans. I have not, and here's why. Quicken Loans. I'm going to pause this for a second.
I'm getting pre-approved. I think I was going to, and this happened yesterday. So she said to me, who do you recommend? I told her, and she said, well, my brother-in-law uses Quicken Loans and loves it. And I was kind of like, ooh, I have to say, I didn't know. So I just kind of fiddled around a little bit. And I just said, you know what? I'm not fully aware of Quicken Loans, but I can get back to you. And, so
here's the problem. It's a lot later. So they tend to, some of those, any of those online banking tend to send out, oh, well, you can only do it for this. So they throw out an interest rate that's extremely, or offers that are very, very low, but then they end up taking it back, and it, based on your qualifications, then it doesn't fit.
Okay.
What I would say is, hey, if you're looking at online banking, you should look at Keller Mortgage, because I can get you zero loan fees and zero loan origination fees and money back at close. How does that sound? I would send them your mobile app and let them apply to Keller Mortgage online. They do a really nice job.
Okay.
And they're very diligent about making sure that they close. When anyone asks me about lenders, I say all lenders are not created equal. And one of the most important things for me is that I deliver what we promise. I cannot promise you that we are going to close on time and with less headache if you choose somebody that I've never worked with before. And I get nothing for you working with these people. I know that I could trust them because they do good work. So it's up to you. I'll use whoever. And I promise you, it will be a headache if we don't use one of them.
Okay, good.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
Other questions about documents? Has this been helpful?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. It's important to know your documents, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you read through them, all the little fine print, so that you can explain it to your client so that you're not shocked or surprised. Know your contracts. I work with too many agents that have no idea what they're even doing, and it shows. And the one that ends up suffering is their client. And we don't want to gamble our clients' money, right? So it's important to know your documents and know what it's saying, all right? Y'all, it's been great. I will, let's see, what have we got coming up? Oh, later today, we've got Command Happy Hour. So if you've got any issues or you need some help on working on some stuff, make sure you jump on with Kevin Jackson and enjoy a happy hour with him. He does drink beer while he's on it, so it's okay. You can drink while you're doing it, okay? All right, I'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
See ya.